Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Mike.
Over to you.
Can you all hear me at the back if I hold this low? I'm just going to be talking about some of my master's research I conducted in 2009-2010. I did an assessment of the KwaZulu-Natal line fishery. So it was just a snapshot study, an independent survey. And yeah, let me just get into it. So where does my research fit in? Well, line fishing is South Africa's largest fishery. So there's multiple users. So we've got recreational, charter, subsistence fishermen. And I mean, there's many species and many methods of harvesting these fish. Biggest problem with that is that with all these number of fish that can be caught using different methods and the number of sectors that are competing for the same sort of fish, there's a lot of management, well, not problems, but challenges, involved in trying to regulate these various fisheries. And sorry, is there a laser anywhere around? Thanks. Okay, and what the biggest thing is that you obviously need to know how your management regulations, are they controlling the fisheries, or are the fisheries, being overexploited and so on. So periodic adjustments in management is obviously a key. But how do we get these periodic adjustments? Well, we need to do lionfish, research such as an assessment. And Bruce Mann did an assessment with some other colleagues back in 1997. I don't know if some of you remember that, where they did an assessment of the entire South African coastline, and there were a suite of papers that came out with that. But I mean, that was over a decade ago. I think it's actually 13, 14 years ago in 1997 when that came out. So there's quite a lack of understanding between then and now recently. And in that time, there's been a lot of changes in the fishery. So we've had the commercial capping, 70% of the commercial lionfish rights were dropped away in KZN. There's also the beach vehicle ban that's been introduced, a suite of new lionfish regulations on certain species, and a whole host of other things such as the recreational licensing and so on. So one of the main aims and objectives of my study was to evaluate the overall management effectiveness of the KZN line fishery. Of course, we would have liked to do it along the whole of the South African coastline, but only one person and there wasn't enough research funding and so on to do that, but it's still available at present if anyone is keen. But I focused mainly on the shore and boat-based line fisheries, so shore being rock and surf fishermen on the actual shore and not in the estuaries and stuff like that, and boat-based being offshore. My more specific objectives were try to determine total fisher participation and demographics. So what I was doing is I was obviously measuring guys' catch and their effort and so on, but I also did, on top of that, I did a questionnaire survey which took about 10 minutes, but I didn't interview all the anglers. I only interviewed a certain few, and we found out a whole bunch of other demographics, age, and so on and so forth. Obviously, we're trying to determine catch composition effort, the catch per unit effort. We also, like I've mentioned already, that we wanted to compare the results with something. So we wanted to mainly compare it with the National Marine Lionfish System, but also we wanted to compare it with the study done by Bruce back in 1907, as well as other research done prior to that by Joubert in the late 70s. And then lastly, we also wanted to assess current fisher awareness. So as I mentioned, we did the questionnaire side, and we want to see, do the fishermen know the regulations, do they break the regulations, and do they understand the regulations? And then the final thing is obviously to make recommendations to try and improve the management of the fishery in general, focusing on the shore and boat-based side of it. My study area obviously is KwaZulu-Natal. What I did is we divided the coast into 15 zones, the same zones that Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife Staff patrol, and obviously that was for comparative reasons so that I could compare to the NOS to see if the differences I got or have shown or similarities, and what are the reasons thereof. Just simple materials and methods quickly. We use a stratified random roving creel survey, so that's just going on patrols every day. Also, like I said, as I mentioned, we did the questionnaire survey opportunistically. Each patrol was randomized according to zone, time, direction, and we tried to get an equal amount of fishing during the week versus on weekends. So public holidays were included as weekends, and we sampled those equally. In the boat fishery, very similar. We did a stratified random access point survey. Obviously, because boats can only launch at specific launch sites, therefore we had to go to specific launch sites to actually get the boats. We also used the Lionfish Observer program, which was run through ORI and DAF. And what that is there were 2 observers based, one in Richards Bay, one down Shelley Beach, and they collected very similar data to what I did doing access point surveys for approximately 3 years. And then again, we did the associated questionnaire, so I interviewed skippers and asked them general demographic information, and then 6 days, 6 weekends, and then it's randomized according to the zone, more specifically launch site and time. However, obviously, as boats are very dependent on weather, we only generally sampled when they'd gone to sea, because it's pointless going to launch site when there were no boats out. Just some results. Sorry if I'm going through a bit quickly. I just want to try and get everything across. There's quite a lot to show you. I did approximately 406 patrols, interviewed 5,000 anglers. Obviously, this is just in 12 months, 1 year. The density of anglers is roughly about 3.7 anglers per kilometer. Catch per unit effort was about 0.18 fish per angler per hour, or 0.07 kgs per angler per hour. And participation was roughly around 55,000 anglers participating in KZN. And in terms of effort, we roughly, taking into account turnover, so the number of anglers coming in within a 24-hour period, roughly 800,000 angler days per year. Just quickly, the bars here represent effort, and the solid line CPU, this is number of fish per angler per hour, this is kg. You can see, these are the zones at the bottom, that in areas where there's a lot of urban development, so around Durban, Ballito, and the south coast, there's quite a lot of effort, but obviously that's related to the number of guys living and fishing in this area. But then, interestingly, there's Cape Vidal, St. Lucia, where you've got high peaks in the number of anglers fishing from the shore, and obviously that's because those are popular holiday destinations. Just quickly, I want to point something out to you. If you look at the kg of fish per angler per hour versus the number, you can see the fish caught in this area is high, but they are generally smaller fish, whereas here the fish generally caught are a lot larger. And that's quite important, and that goes to show that the fishery from the shore is actually generally, the guys are catching a lot more smaller fish than there are bigger fish. In terms of season, you can see, and it's the same thing, the effort being the bar, that in winter we have the most number of anglers fishing, and obviously the catch per unit effort is higher, so guys are generally going fishing at that time. And for those of you who know anything about fish, that's the time when we get a lot of shad coming up from Cape, as well as garrick and so on, so the fishing is really good at that time, so that's generally when the guys are fishing. But again, you can see there's a lot of smaller fish, so such as carantine and whatnot, blacktail making up a large proportion of those catch, whereas in the other times of the year it's a lot bigger fish. 5 species accounted for around 77% of the catch in the shore fishery, and these are generally made up, as a few of them mentioned already, carantine, shad, blacktail, pinkies, Cape moonies, stump nose, and then a whole host of other fish. Just remember that that's quite important, because although Bruce and myself have showed that carantine is one of the most important fish caught in the fishery, if you have a look at the National Marine Lionfish data, which is collected by Isabella staff, shad is actually one of the top important fish. Total catch was roughly around 250, 280 metric tons, and that's obviously related to the angler effort throughout the year. Just some quick conclusions about the shore fishery. Total participation has remained constant. So if you compare it to Bruce's study done in 1997, it's very, very similar. Overall effort has decreased. This is quite a big thing. The effort has decreased, but obviously there's a number of things that could account for that, such as the beach vehicle ban, the accessibility to certain areas. There's also security reasons. There could be an economic factor. It's a bit more expensive to go fishing, so the effort has decreased. Catch per unit effort. It's very similar to what Bruce also got similar numbers. However, certain species have decreased while others are overexploited. So if you look back 20, 30 years ago, you'll see that cob used to have a big showing in the catches, whereas now it doesn't really have as much. Catch composition, it's relatively similar to 1996. So as I mentioned, Bruce's stuff is very similar to mine, but the NMLS does show a little bit of difference. And total catch has declined, but this is related to the decrease in effort. As I said, I'm going through this fairly quickly, but we've published this shore fishery stuff recently. It actually came out yesterday. So if you look in the African Journal of Marine Science, there's a lot more information that explains things a bit better, and we've also included a bit of the demographic stuff within that. Just going on to some of the boats, I did 390 access point inspections, so that's 390 launch sites visited, and I checked 1,300 boats, which is roughly equally made up of 500 recreationals, 200 charters, and 500 commercial outings. Obviously, if a boat goes out today and tomorrow, that's included as one checking once, checking twice. So it can be the same boat checked on different occasions. Just quickly here, the total number of boats in the fishery is around 3,000 recreational, 100 charter, and 40 commercials. Which roughly comes out to about 3,000 number of boats active in the KwaZulu-Natal boat fishery. And this equates to about 20,000 anglers fishing on those boats. If you wonder why the charter number is so high, obviously you must remember that guys fishing on a charter might fish on a once-off basis. So we try to incorporate that aspect. In terms of total annual effort, there's approximately 40,000 launches along the coast. Obviously, recreational is having the highest number because there's a lot more boats. In terms of catch per unit effort, you can see extremely higher number of fish caught in the commercial sector. But obviously, this is related to what each sector is trying to achieve. Recreationals generally enjoy fishing for game fish, takes a lot more time, trawling and so on. They don't really target bottom fish, whereas a commercial going out to get the best feasible option, only targeting bottom fish. So that's why that is so high. Just some of the effort. Again, the bars representing effort and the lines representing catch per unit effort. You can see that during December, April, Easter, June, July, when there's popular holidays, that's generally when you get your highest amount of recreational effort. And catch per unit effort varies throughout the year. Here you can see that the number of fish caught is a lot. They catch a less amount of fish, but those fish are generally larger. So kuta, one kuta, it's only one fish, but it weighs up to 8 kilograms and so on. The charter sector, very similar to the recreational. Again, December, January, June, July, April, popular holidays. That's when people want to go fishing. You come down to Durban from Johannesburg, you want to go charter fishing, you hire out a charter boat and you go charter fishing. Again, very similar catch trends. And then the commercial fishery, obviously because commercials are trying to get the most money out of the fishery, they kind of launch at every opportunity. So you can see effort is high throughout the year, as well as catch per unit effort is generally high throughout the year. But you can see the number of fish, they're generally catching a lot more fish, but these fish weigh a lot less. Interestingly, if you look in all three sectors, you'll see that in August, September, October, effort is generally lowest, but obviously that's when our windy period is and there's not many opportunities to go out to sea. Just continuing, I measured 86 species belonging to 27 families, and I've just combined the overall species composition for all sectors, and you can see it's mainly reef fish, slinger being over 50%, but obviously because there's such a strong pull towards the commercial fishing, over 300 fish per boat per outing, this is dominated by the reef fish that these guys target. If I had to pull these apart separately, you would see that recreationals would catch more game fish, charters kind of 50-50, and then commercials generally only reef fish. And in terms of total catch, it's approximately almost 1.5 million fish per annum, or 1,500 tons, and this is broken down into about 800 tons for the commercial fishery. And interestingly, if you look at the charter fishery, there's only 100 boats active there, yet they still take quite an extraordinary amount of fish per year. Just some conclusions. Total participation compared to Bruce's stuff, there's been no shift. There's been no increase or decrease in the number of boats. It's approximately the same. However, there's been a big shift between the sectors. So as I mentioned earlier, there was the commercial cut in rights. A lot of commercial guys lost their rights. So what happened is most of those guys that lost their rights that were active commercials kind of either became recreationals or continued to become charters because they could still access the fishery and make money off that, and they didn't get their commercial right. Overall effort has decreased. However, obviously this is related to that commercial capping of 70%. However, it's probably also related to profitability. So how profitable is it these days to actually go out and catch fish, and that's your sole business income, is to catch fish and bring money from it? An analysis of overall CPU catch composition and total catch compared to Bruce's stuff, very, very similar. However, if you compare again to 30, 40 years ago, it seems that our fishery for the boat side is superficially sustainable at current fishing effort levels, so we're kind of bumbling along at the bottom. And then again, we've recently submitted this paper. I'm actually just waiting for the proofs to come out. So that's, again, you can refer to that paper for further information. And then just final overall recommendations for the fishery as a whole. So importantly, we need detailed analysis of the catch trends and stock assessments on those key line fish species. And this is obviously to update and rationalize some of the new management regulations that can come out. Importantly, the charter boat sector needs to be recognized in terms of the Marine Living Resources Act. So currently there is no limit on the number of charter fishermen that you can have, skippers, boat users, whereas there's only 38 commercial rights allocated at the moment, and I think there's only 52 that they are allowed to be inactive, whereas for the charter sector, anyone that wants to become a charter can register, and that number can obviously increase, and that kind of can come to big problems because charter fishermen can fish and catch fish. They're kind of subsidized by the paying clients in a sense, and a lot of them do actually sell their fish anyway, so they're semi-commercials. And then obviously more practical management options for sustainable utilization. So marine protected areas, as Jade mentioned, we either have to extend the current ones or bring in a few more. As I think that's a big key, because I think I haven't showed a lot of the demographic and questionnaire stuff, but a lot of the guys knew quite a lot about the regulations, and they were quite knowledgeable about them. But at the same time, they didn't really stick to them a lot, and they, there's a common saying of you learn the rules well to break them. So, thank you very much.
Well done. You managed to cover it. Don't run away. You managed to cover a lot of territory and still left time for a few questions. There's a question from the back there. Wait for the microphone if you would. Well
done. Thanks very much for an interesting talk. It may just be a perception of mine. I spend a fair bit of time at the coast, and I've seen an awful lot more paddle ski fishermen operating in sort of recent times. Is that something that you considered, or have you looked at the impact of surf ski fishermen on these resources as well?
I did interview a few of the surf ski fishermen during my study, but obviously that wasn't my focus. The problem with surf ski fishermen is they can kind of launch wherever they like. So for me to actually, when I was doing my patrols, I kind of, if I saw one, I'd make an opportunity. I'd be, okay, let me quickly get a boat, and I'd go and try and get them. But you would see them out at sea, but I couldn't really access them. Bruce has actually just recently published, Bruce and Jade, they published a paper on the paddle ski fishery. I think, what did you guys use? The catch cards? Shark Sport data and catch cards, and they've done a small evaluation, and that paper came out now 2 months ago. So that paper is available. It's a brief assessment of the paddle ski fishery. But yeah, it was difficult to kind of get those. But yeah, you can refer to the paper for. I don't know if that answers your question.
But do you have a gut feel as to kind of the impact? Is it because you're looking at a number of boats, and you're looking at because this has now opened up a whole new arena for fishermen. It's any sort of average income person can purchase a paddle ski, and they're away.
Bruce, do you want to answer that question? I'll answer it.
We're running out of time.
Okay, I'll just quickly answer that question, Mike. I think the ski boat, the paddle ski fishermen generally don't target bottom fish as much. So I think they're generally targeting most of the game fish. So I think the impact there is not necessarily, as well as they're also limited for space. So it can kind of go either which way. But I don't know.